So it's my great pleasure to introduce the first speaker to you, who is, you are so lucky to have this gentleman as your Vice President in the university. So I'll tell you all the things he does. UBC Vice President External. He's also, he used to be the Liberal Member of Parliament for Vancouver Quarter. And he has been an advisor to the US governments and international institutions in Asia, Africa, Eastern Europe, and Latin America on issues of human rights, conflict resolution, environmental sustainability, and governance. Please join me in welcoming Stephen Owen.
Thank you, Gillian and Ellen, and all of your colleagues who have organized this important conference. I think as we look at this extremely complex issue, we've got to think about dichotomies. Are we talking about 4 pillars, or are we talking about 3 strikes? Are we talking about a civil city, or are we talking about a war on drugs? Is it a demand side or a supply side problem? And they're immensely complex answers to these difficult questions. Unfortunately, we've got less agreement in society, and particularly at the political level, than we need to actually come to grips with a public imperative to solve these dilemmas. But there is one paradox of the prison that I think we should keep in mind if we're thinking about walking away this problem. That perhaps the most secure place in society should be a prison. And yet, in prison, you're probably more likely to be assaulted, to be raped, to become addicted, to become infected, and to die than anywhere else in our society. Let's just keep that in mind when we think about how we might respond to drug, mental illness, poverty, and property crime. Now, where else but at a university could we be having this discussion? And where else should we be having it? We've got to have it out in society because governments of all stripes and at all levels are very averse to leadership. And I say that as someone who, a one-time politician for 6 years, in government, for instance, around climate change. I sat in Prime Minister Chrétien's cabinet in 2002, and we agreed unanimously to ratify the Kyoto Protocol. So it was unanimous. We had huge and growing surpluses. We had David Anderson, who was at that time as Environment Minister for Canada, but also chairman of the UN Environment Program's Governing Council, probably the most respected environment minister in the world at the time, and yet there was no public imperative. We couldn't do enough fast enough to deal with climate change. And you talk about the politicization of science and research. To watch what's happened with that issue over the last 15 years should be truly troubling to us. So how do we get that imperative? How do we force governments to do the right thing? The toughest dollar any government ever spends is a preventative dollar. And yet we know that economically that's the most cost effective, and in social terms it's the most just. But governments don't do it. Reactive dollars flow like rivers. But how do we create imperatives to get governments to do the things they should be doing up front? And that's very much an issue around our policy. So the university and science in its broadest sense of knowledge, speaks really awkwardly to policy. We don't do it well at universities. And we don't do it well because we don't work in an interdisciplinary way. And that's why ISA is so important. That's how you create public policy. That's how you speak to governments. It's through interdisciplinarity. And so that just underlines the importance of this type of organization, and certainly this type of pressure on a university institution. And we should feel the pressure. You're demonstrating something that universities don't do well. And I think we should learn from that. But universities themselves are great builders of intellectual capital. Teaching, learning, research, that's wonderful. But we get stuck inside our own walls. And I think if we're going to speak convincingly to the public to create an imperative to get governments to do the right thing, then we're going to have to go from intellectual capital building to social capital building. Social capital, rules, norms of behavior, and processes of accommodation that let a complex and often conflicted society move forward on difficult public policy issues. Universities are uniquely poised to build social capital. We have institutional independence. We've got a wide range of expertise that we can enter into and research into the public debate. And we can engage the public in a way that helps them self-govern, which is really what democracy is all about. So this is immensely important at this university. Democracy is, the definition I like, is the pluralistic respect for citizens empowered to self-govern within the rule of law. So pluralism, self-government, and we've got to do it within a framework of law. And the most important part of the framework of law, the rule of law, is that governments have to follow the law. So that self-government is the sort of thing that can be empowered by this sort of action. So I hope this is just a small start, a small ripple that will certainly spread throughout the university and encourage us to do more of this type of public dialogue in an interdisciplinary way. We're starting. We had two of the speakers here today, Owen and Julian as well, were Thomas Kerr and Rick Mathias. We're at public conversations, really, we were hosting at the downtown Russell Square campus over the last 3 weeks, trying to come to grips with these difficult issues. But there were high school students, university students, people from the justice system, health professionals, and social scientists coming to grips somehow with this problem. Now, we put forward a proposal at UBC to the Minister of Health in Victoria, Georgiana, to fund the establishment at UBC of a Centre of Excellence for addictions and concurrent disorders. And those concurrent disorders, whether they're poverty or they're mental illness or they're suffering abuse sufferers, whatever they might be, we have some of the leading scientists in the world here to come to grips with that. And partnered with the Centre of Excellence for HIV/AIDS, this is an immensely powerful potential. And I was very pleased to get a copy today of a letter that Sam Sullivan has just sent to Tony Clement, the federal health minister, mentioning this Centre of Excellence and urging the federal government to support it. At the same time, he was urging the federal government to extend the license or the exemption for Insite to continue. So I think with June 30th coming up and with self-government on our minds, you should take the outcome and the energy of this conference and send it on to Tony Clement, because he and his government are going to be making that decision in the next couple of days, if they haven't already made it. But there's still time to change their minds if they make it in the wrong direction. So I congratulate you all for taking part in this. This is the type of dialogue that we need in our society if we're going to improve the condition of people living here. This is, you know, this gleaming city in this prosperous country has this extraordinary despair. And until we start to face it straight on and come to grips with the real reality of it, and that has to start with science and research. And then it means interdisciplinary discussion, and then it means public mobilization, and then it means forcing governments to do the right thing. So I congratulate you for that, and I'm very pleased to be able to spend some time with you.